Hey guys, so if you have a manual transmission that's getting harder to shift, or it's grinding gears a lot, or sometimes you can't even get it into gear, one of the first things to troubleshoot would be to check the transmission fluid. A lot of the times transmission fluid will break down and it won't protect and lubricate as well as it should, or your fluid level could just be low. So before you go and expect to change out a clutch or your synchros or something, just check the transmission fluid. It's the easiest and cheapest troubleshooting thing you could do. To show you guys how to do this, I'll be using a Ford Ranger, and it has the M5OD-R1 transmission. It's a pretty common transmission, but this video will be specific to that 5-speed manual transmission. But these steps are really going to be the same through, across the board, no matter what manual transmission you come across. All right, so this here is a 1993 Ford Ranger. It has the 5-speed Mazda manual transmission. The M5OD stands for manual 5-speed overdrive, and then the R1 is basically the recognition that it's a light-duty transmission as opposed to the R2. Pretty much any Ford Ranger or Bronco 2 that you come across that has a manual transmission will have this one. Alright, so changing the transmission fluid in the M5OD transmissions is really easy. All you need is a 15/16 inch socket, and that works for the fill plug and the drain plug. You need automatic transmission fluid. Yes, I know it's a manual transmission, but it does take ATF. Just make sure that it's compliant with Mercon, preferably Mercon 5, and the O'Reilly brand automatic transmission fluid is. A lot of people think that since the manual transmission is a gearbox that they need to put gear oil in there. But with the M5ODs, they are splash lubricated. So if you put a thick gear oil in there, it's not going to be able to basically splash around and lubricate properly. So that's why you want to use Mercon 5 ATF. It doesn't really matter. Some people like the full synthetic stuff. This is just a cheap old Ford Ranger, so I just used the cheap automatic transmission fluid. So 15/16 inch socket, your ATF, a fluid pump will make this job way easier, way faster, and way cleaner. And then obviously some paper towels for quick cleanup. So now that I have everything I need, I'll hop under the truck here and show you guys how to change the transmission fluid. It's a real quick 5-minute job. Ford specifically, they say that you should do this every 60,000 miles. But it's so cheap and easy that it wouldn't hurt to do it every 15 to 30,000 miles, just as kind of cheap insurance. I almost forgot, you're probably going to want a drain pan too. If you're like me, you're probably not going to want to be dumping ATF all over your garage floor. Alrighty, so crawl under your truck on the driver's side, and that right here is your drain plug for your transmission. This is your fill plug. Before you do anything with this, you want to break loose your fill plug, because you'd really hate to drain all your fluid out and turns out you can't get anything back in it. So that's the first step, and I'll go ahead and break that loose. And when you see fluid coming out like that, that's perfectly fine. That means that your fluid level is all right, because when you go to fill it, you're going to fill it until fluid comes out of this hole, and that's how you know that it's full. So now that that's broken loose, we'll go ahead and start draining it. Now that stuff is supposed to be like a bright pink or bright red. So you can tell that it's definitely due for a changing, and it looks very, very thick compared to how it should be. So we'll let that drain out for a good 10 minutes until it's just barely dripping, and I'll show you what's next. Alright, so while that's draining, you want to take your drain plug, and there's a magnet on the end, and you can see all those metal shavings. That's normal. That's what's going to happen. Obviously, it's metal on metal contact. So you're going to have metal shavings and wear. You just want to make sure there aren't any huge chunks. And basically you just want to take this magnet and clean it off. Get all the metal shavings off of there. And you can see all the sludge that's at the bottom of this transmission too. So this hasn't been done in a long time. But the metal shavings are pretty minimal actually. I'm surprised. You'd think that for this old of a truck they'd be a lot worse. So that's good news. Alright, once you got your drain plug all cleaned up, go ahead and install it. It doesn't have to be extremely tight. I would say just snug it up a little bit more than hand tight and it should be good. If you wrench it on there, you can ruin these threads pretty easily. Alright, so she's not dripping too bad anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and install the drain plug. If you want, you could throw like a quart of fluid in there and then re-drain it just to kind of give it a quick rinse and get all the gunk out of there. But like I said, this is a cheap old truck, so I'm not too worried about it. Alright, so now you got your pump on your bottle of ATF. All you got to do now is pump the fluid into the transmission, and you want to fill it until fluid starts to come out of the fill hole, and that's how you know it's full. Alright, so you can see that the M5OD-R1 transmission took about 2.5 quarts of ATF. And just as a quick comparison, that's what the fluid looked like when it went into the transmission, and that's what it looks like now. So I would suggest doing this every 15 to 30,000 miles and not waiting the 60,000 miles like they say is okay to do. Alright, and that's it. That's how you change the transmission fluid in an M5OD-R1 transmission. If you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer them right away. If this video was helpful, please leave a like or a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to Midwest Garage. We have a lot of new content coming out every week.